So I have a confession to make. I'm one of those people who studied sciences at university and went into business and became an accountant. So I'm hoping that you'll forgive me for that transgression as I stand on the stage in front of you. Now, I was really interested in terms of the topic of the conversation today, which is really that expansive one around how do we build an innovative, inclusive, vibrant society with a strong economy, for me personally, one that I can be proud to hand on to my children. And what are things that we need to pay attention to? And my premise to you today is that there are two different things that need to happen. One is a fundamentally different way in which business, science, industry, arts all collaborate together to achieve things. And a second one is that the way in which society operates needs to fundamentally shift and change. And I'm thinking that some of the things that I might say about that may resonate for those of you in the scientific communities, through to the politicians, through to those of you in business. So let's see. I start from a place, and when I took on the leadership of my firm, my motivation for that was looking at a world which was reaching the limits of its sustainable resources. A world where fundamentally my business cannot thrive unless society around it is thriving too. My business serves growing, dynamic businesses. If they aren't able to grow and thrive, I have no business. So there was definitely an enlightened self-interest in there. But then you start to look broad, and you start to see challenges that seemed quite esoteric when I was growing up, around water scarcity, around food scarcity, around the biggest mass migration that we've seen outside of world wars. And you start to see challenges that we all know can't be addressed by any one agent acting on their own. And you start to think, well, what then do we do about those challenges? And we do that against this backdrop where trust is an issue. There's been some correlated work. Now, I stand in front of scientists who will give me all evidence as to why. All I know is that I see day to day that there are situations where there are great innovations that are not taken up because people don't trust them. And I think the example David gave at the start around GM foods is a great example. On one hand, you have potentially something that could help to ensure food security for an ever-expanding global population. On the other hand, you have deep distrust in the major businesses that are fueling that with the belief they're doing it to fuel their own profitability and self-interest. And you have those two sitting in hands which potentially can actually stop us from breaking through what might need to happen. Now, I thought I'd throw in an equation, bringing in sort of a bit of scientific background. One of the equations that we use in professional services for trust is that trust equals your credibility. Are you honest? Do you know what you're talking about? Reliability. Do you actually keep your promises? Intimacy. Do you actually care about human beings and allow the space for people to express their uncertainties and build that real connection with them? And all of that is undermined, divided by self-orientation. Who are you in it for? Are you interested in it for yourself, your self-glorification, your ego, your own profits? Or are you in it because you think that actually by achieving whatever you're achieving, you will actually be doing something that's good for someone else too? And I would put it to you that if we then step back and say, well, if we know there are these big challenges that need innovation on a new scale, and we know that trust is a challenge in that, then what is the current environment that we have created in our world that presents the challenge and that I think that we have to shift? And I'd identify three different things that I think are a real challenge for us. The first one is this issue of self-interest. We have created a world where operating the short term for my family, for my profit, for what's good for me, has become the established norm. Where I was talking to David, last time I was on a panel with David, I was sharing a panel with him and Dr. Robert Putnam from the States, who'd written a wonderful book about the end of the American dream. And he said a phrase to me that stuck with me then, which was, when did our kids become my kids. And I thought it was a beautiful summation of this shift in psyche to move from the we as a human race are collectively in things together to it's me, I'm all out for myself. And never more have we seen that in the various political discourses going on around the world. And it's interesting how that fueling of self-interest is something that is actually causing an interesting inequality in trust itself. Most recent research from Edelman, who do some work on this each year, is that what they're seeing now is a real split in trust between what they call the informed population, that's people in the top 25% of the income bracket in their country who regularly read newspapers, so relatively low bar, I'd say. But the top 25, that group, there is a 10% differential in trust across the board between what they call the mass population. And that is allowing a real fueling of the self-interest that we're seeing in a lot of the populist politics that goes on today. So that's an interesting thread. The second one is this idea that that actually competition between people is what creates great results. That if I'm fighting against you and I get an idea and I hold it away and I keep it to myself and I then reveal it and I get all the glory, that somehow that's better for society than if we're doing things differently. And it's interesting how that view of the scientific community is even translated into populist television. Now, I don't know how many people have sneaky pleasures with something like Holby City. I may be alone in the audience, okay? Right, so it's a medical drama on TV. It's 8 o'clock on Tuesdays. If you ever want a guilty pleasure, it's okay. But it's interesting, you know, one of the storylines that had been running just recently was about a senior doctor who'd been doing some research on heart surgery, and another doctor who was jealous of her nicked her research and sold it to another guy in Germany so that she was completely undermined. So that idea of competition, people fighting against each other, dog eat dog, is something that is actually in the mainstream view of how scientists operate, not just politicians and business people. So that, I think, is an interesting thread. And the third one is the assumption of how our world operates, which still operates on this idea of a hierarchy, that we operate like a machine where there are people at the top who can do the thinking, who turn the wheels, turn the cogs, and things will happen. And I think in each of the different strands of what we're seeing in the world, we're seeing a rejection of those different ways of operating. You know, we see the whole rhetoric of people don't want to listen to experts and be told what to do. People don't behave like machines. And a recognition that just perhaps the human race is actually more like an ecosystem, just like a forest, than like a machine with cogs and wheels to be turned. So if those are the three things that I think are dominant paradigms in terms of how things operate, the self-interest, competition, and hierarchy, then what are the possibilities? What are the ways in which we could shift in how we operate the world to get different results? So I'll leave you with three thoughts. What if? What if we were actually operating from a world where we all had the clear purpose and intent that was really about how do we further humanity in a really clear and purposeful way? And that was set as a clear outcome, a clear vision, perhaps for the UK, as to what we're really working towards and how do we play our part in it, rather than people fighting for their individual bits of how they're going to work separately. For my business, how I've translated that with our team is that instead of our purpose being about how do you flog as much professional services to people, which is kind of the professional services model, whether people care to admit it or not, to actually how do we help to shape a vibrant economy? How do we ensure that the advice that we're giving, the people that we work with, the ways in which we can actually shift and shape how business operates actually is in the long-term interests of how society operates as a whole? It's a big shift. I kind of think it's worth trying to have a go at doing something different. What if, instead of operating in a world where we're fighting against each other, with that shared purpose, we actually work together to actually deliver on shared outcomes? Now, interestingly, we may be overtaken by machines in this. If you look at what Watson is doing in the area of cancer, you know, it's able to suck up the results from all over the world. It doesn't have that worrying about, am I going to get a paper published or any of these different things. It's just interested in how to actually bring together the data, to use it in a way to deliver better outcomes for patients. That's it. So machines may overtake us if we don't take the initiative ourselves. And the final one I'd put to you is in the world of hierarchy. Whether we realize it or not, the world out there is rejecting hierarchy. Just as in a forest, if winter's coming, you don't sit and wait for the tall trees to come up with a plan as to how the forest should respond. You know, the world actually senses and responds to issues and makes judgments and decisions. If we continue to operate as if the top-down, wait for the instructions from the top is the way that we need to operate, we will find that we get the bigger and bigger separation, and instead of being able to come together and solve our issues, we will find that we get increasing fracture and challenges in our society. When you go out into a place where instead of operating from a hierarchy, you operate from the idea that we're a connected ecosystem of people, that you take to people the shared vision and outcome that we want to work with. You operate from a premise of we want to collaborate together. And then you open up to people to explore the possibilities. What are the possibilities of how collectively we can solve these problems? I put it to you that that is the only way that we really will create an inclusive, vibrant society in which no one is left behind. Thank you.